People oftentimes they want to know, what is it you're actually doing when you do that adjustment? Are you shoving the bone back into place? What is that crunch noise? And even though I don't do the style of practice, where you do need to twist or crunch or the bone into place, you don't have to do that at all. Nevertheless, there's an important process in terms of what's going on beneath the surface, but also what it means in terms of a person's ability to actually maintain that correction over a period of time. And so, what I might use, it's easiest if I'm sort of using my hands like this. We're not actually talking about bones at all. We're talking about the joints, the intersection where two bones come together. And as it relates to the neck in particular, and then all other joints of the spine, what we are most interested in is how well they are able to move. Every single joint in the spine should have a normal range of motion, something like this, that lets us nod our head up and down, lets us turn the head side to side, let it, rotate it like this. And so when all of the joints are normally moving in that normal, cohesive manner without obstruction, they're going to have that normal central pivot point, and it's able to then move the way that it is supposed to. Now, the kind of condition that we're interested in as, upper cervical chiropractors in particular, is the relationship between those joints if and when they've been injured. And we have different levels and degrees of injury. At the most severe end, we're going to have, fracture, dislocation. On the low end, you've got, sprains and strains and boo-boos and things like that, things that the body's quite able to heal on its own. But in chiropractic, what we're concerned with is a specific kind of condition that is somewhere in the middle. It's not broken, it's not dislocated, but the consequence of a physical injury is that vertebra shifted away from its normal center of gravity, and as a consequence of the injury to some of the ligament fibers and maybe even some of the muscle fibers, that vertebra has now been offset. Sometimes it's called a joint position error, a grade 1 sprain, joint entrapment. It's where, if you've ever had, maybe it's something like with your phone or with a remote control, you have the thing in your hand, it slips out of your hand, falls on the ground, goes crack, something like that, and the remote's not broken. But you might notice that there's a certain edge around it where normally you have two bits of the plastic normally where they would come together. And somehow or another, the force of the injury, what happened is that they have kind of dislodged against themselves like this. And as a consequence, you have to strain and push to get it back in there so that it just clicks, come back into position. In some ways, we're not talking about something that's so terribly different. We're talking about the physical injury that has caused the joint surfaces to offset. And sometimes it is only a couple of millimeters. However, when you look at the size of these things, 2 millimeters is typically around 20% of the total joint surface. And so if you have a 20% disruption in normal motion, normal function, even if that doesn't cause immediate problems, certainly if you add up 20% over days, months, weeks, maybe even years, that can start to create a whole bunch of different issues. And not just in the neck per se, but because of what's inside of the neck. Spinal cord, brainstem. If you start to interfere with the normal function and the normal flow of information between the brain and the body, you can start having all kinds of different health issues. And these are the kinds of things, why we as chiropractic are able to help the people who we are, and oftentimes how we're able to help them with such a widespread series of effects. It's because the effects, the things that they're feeling, can be secondary to this condition that's actually happened with the spine. Now, I go into that background just a little bit to give you a little bit of appreciation then, because when we're doing an adjustment then, when we're making a correction, unlike that remote control that I was talking about, we are not actually trying to shove the thing back into a certain position at all, because that's not ultimately how it works. See, in order for anything in your body to heal properly, It's got to be done by your own innate wisdom, those healing mechanisms, those healing forces that you have within you. And they are going to be doing a good chunk of their work with muscles. So when we make a correction, essentially what we're doing is we're trying to overcome the inertia just to get some movement back and through that area. And oftentimes, and this is what I tell people, frequently if they're thinking about, coming to see us at the practice, first thing that you would try some general stretching on your own and maybe some basic mobilization. So having somebody else do some stretching for you, do some massage therapy, do some physiotherapy, do different kinds of treatments to see, is it possible that just by getting some general motion through that area, if that's going to be enough to overcome the inertia to where your body's going to be able to fix that issue in and of itself. And if that's the case, awesome, you don't need a chiropractor. However, there's a significant percent of the population who do, despite doing all of the stretches and the activities and the strengthening activities and the massages and the mobilizations, that it's just not working. It's because these people here, that thing is stuck just a little bit more. It's going to need a little bit more precision to be able to get it through that normal range of motion again so that it can ultimately heal the way that it is supposed to. So when we are making that correction, really all that we need to do is go by feel. How much force was it actually used to lock up? But again, these things typically only move maybe 1 centimeter one way or another. You don't have to push the thing, from here to kingdom come. You only need to get it mobile again by a couple of millimeters. And typically the amount of force that you need to use is no more than you would use to click a pen. I use the example if I was to, ask the question, how much force do you need to open a door? Well, if it's a very light door, you're not going to bash it down every single time. And if it was a very heavy door, a couple little finger widths is not going to be enough to, overcome that resistance right there. The amount of force you need to open a door is in direct proportion to the inertia and the heaviness of the door. So you go on feel, and you start to push, and you feel, okay, that's the point of resistance, and all you need is just that little bit more. Just that little bit more than that point of resistance, and it will open quite easily and automatically on its own. That's what we're looking to achieve when we're doing an adjustment. We're going based on the individual requirements, based on what we can feel and what it's going to take to be able to restore that normal alignment. But then, and this is the real power here, is it's not us who sets the thing exactly where it should be. That's what your innate intelligence, that innate wisdom needs to be able to do for you by using your muscles. So after we make an adjustment, what's very important is that you actually take the opportunity to take it easy, to probably lie down for a little while. And the point and purpose is because, all right, we've put that initial force in, but now what's going to happen is your body is going to be doing all of the fine-tuning movements to bring it back in to where it should be under control. And I'll oftentimes see this, right after I've adjusted a person. They say they feel like they are guarding, they're protecting themselves like this. And I say, yes, I want you to imagine that what I've just done is I've handed you a coin. But now I've told you, well, guess what? That coin is actually solid gold. It's interesting doing this as a thought experiment because you see people kind of bring their hands together like, okay, I'm holding my precious. Something along those lines there. They realize that they're holding something very valuable. Same thing goes when your body has gotten control of that misalignment that it didn't have control over for such a long period of time. Oh, this is good. And it's going to engage and it's going to protect doing what's called splinting to make sure that that does not simply put re-misalign. And the longer then that it's able to actually stay within that normal position, moving the way that it's supposed to, that ultimately is what's going to give your body the best opportunity to heal from whatever these conditions were, whatever the effects that the consequence of that misalignment was producing. Now, to that end, people often want to know, well, how do I get it to stay there, for absolutely forever? And most of the time, the answer is you're not going to be able to. In principle, yes, that's what we're aiming for every single time. The material reality is a little bit different, and there's a few reasons for this. The first one, and let me back up just a little bit. Let's say that I was a dentist and I needed to give you a filling, or I needed to fit a crown for you. Normally, one and done, that's it. Nice and simple, that's what we'd like. Or same thing, you have a fractured limb. And if you've got that fractured limb, what do? You go to the orthopedist and they set it. So whether it's a tooth or whether it's a bone, these things don't move. But joints do. Joints need to move. That's what they're designed to do. And so if you've had the injury, it's going to have the propensity to want to slip back off track. Through what? Through the course of daily living. Just moving your head or your neck. So I say teasingly to people, yes, your adjustment's going to hold forever. All you need is a cure for time, gravity, and stress. That's it. And that will stay there forever. And people oftentimes, they ask me, how and why does stress actually, enter into the equation? It's because to a certain degree, your brain uses your spine as a surge protector. See, when you have your spine misalign and move like this, it can actually, at least in philosophically wise, has a dampening effect, not unlike a surge protector, because if you had too much information going up to your brain, it's going to fry the system. And so by actually modulating the spine, producing misalignments, it can actually, in certain instances, reduce the amount of neural traffic going up or down. And the problem then is if we have lots and lots of stress going on, and that can be any number of different forms, whether that is repetitive physical stress, whether that is chemical stress, so alcohol, poor things in your diet, inadequate things in your diet, or also, and this is the big one, is if you have a large amount of mental and emotional stress. And this can be both conscious and unconscious. It can be lightning bolt kind of stress, fire the circuits kind, and it can also be a low-grade burn, relentless accumulation of stress, like having a computer running with all of its programs going on all at once. If and when you've got these kinds of stressful events going on, your brain needs to actually cause your spine to move in a certain way to help dampen those effects. But here's the problem. It's that if those same joints have been injured, and if they are in the active process of trying to heal, it can sometimes be a case of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. So we can make and give you the most beautiful adjustment ever, and it's going to bring it back in your body's control. However, if you keep going back into the same environment and keep doing things the exact same way you've always done, the stress is going to cause your spine to misalign in this particular way, this particular orientation. Now, if it doesn't trip back out, okay, that's fine. The stress goes away and your body's able to fix the problem on its own. Great, that's what we want. But especially in the beginning, we've got to be really, really careful about these things, because if it goes that little bit and trips back out, that's ultimately what causes these conditions to relapse. And in the beginning, if a person is just starting to see a chiropractor, it's true, their adjustment may only be stable for a day or two at a given time. However, if they're doing things right, that day should turn into a week, should turn into a few weeks, should turn into months. Ideally, it turns into years based on the individual circumstances that you have going on in your life. Irony being, and a lot of times people say, oh, it's going to get worse, as I get older. What I find is that when people retire, that is, they are not doing the same physical repetitive stresses every day. And B, when they don't have the stress of having to show up to work, people's adjustments who, it was only stable for like a month or so at a given time, they're holding for months and months. Some of them even passing a year. So age, my point here, actually has quite nothing to do with it. It has to do with the life circumstances that you have going on. So my point in, walking you through all of this is to, hopefully give you a little bit better explanation in terms of, what and how we're actually working to restore normal movement, to restore normal function with these adjustments, but also to make it abundantly clear that it's not going to be any adjustment that does the healing for you. This is not something the chiropractor does this and now you are fixed. The chiropractor does this adjustment so that your body has the opportunity to do the work that he or she needs to do. We're not going to be able to fix all of the symptoms that you may be experiencing because they can be related to other things. But we know that The alignment, the normal motion of your spine, because of its influence on your nerves, because of its influence on your brain, is one of those key elements that when people do want to be as well and healthy as they say they want to be, that's one of those key ingredients. It's got to be addressed. It's got to be resolved. And then it also has to be protected and maintained to the highest level possible so that people can enjoy the best quality of life possible.